PV, we will start. I think this is the time to start.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
First of all, let me thank Dr. Suneel to kindly agreeing to make a speech in our webinar series. As most of our participants would know, that Skill Council for Green Jobs is organizing a series of webinars on topics relevant to green jobs. And in the Azadi ke Amrit Mahotsav, we thought that why not to have a series of 75 webinars. So this is part of that, and I'm happy to inform that this would be the 59th session or webinar in this series. In fact, seeing the interest of our participants and also the audience, we actually intend to continue it as much as possible and cover new and new topics. I would also like to inform all of you that the recording of all the previous webinars is available in MNRE in SCGJ website, and you can watch any of them. We are also now planning to bring short brief about these speeches in our newsletters. So the upcoming newsletter of Skill Council for Green Jobs would have a brief summary of what our speakers are adding value to our knowledge. With this, I would like that we can start our webinar of today's webinar. May I request Mr. PV Singh to kindly introduce the speaker, please.
Thank you very much, sir, for welcoming the speaker. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll welcome to the 59th series of webinar. Skill Council for Green Job is organizing a series of webinars to celebrate Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav 2022 as a part of India's celebration of 75 years of Independence Day. In this series, SCGJ is inviting eminent and learned speakers in different sectors on sustainable development, renewable energy, and waste management, so as to deepen in the understanding of the recent development in these sectors. The first in the series was launched on 24th September 2021. Today we have very experienced, learned, distinguished speaker who will be sharing his expertise and experience on Can Solar Photovoltaic Technology replicate the feat of mobile telephony today. His profiler is Dr. Suneel Deambi, completed his PhD on gallium arsenide solar cell under a DAE-sponsored project. He has previously served in several prestigious organizations like NPL, TERI, DSIR, GSI, IIT Delhi, and IGNOU. Dr. Suneel has been actively working on the diverse aspects of solar PV since 1990 till date. Dr. Suneel is a prolific writer on S&T issues and has many popular publications to his credit in the leading newspapers and magazines. He has also authored 5 books on the solar PV technology and its applications, beside a recent title on My Days in Kashmir. Dr. Suneel has provided project consultancy services in the twin domain of solar PV and content development energy to a large number of national and international organizations. Thank you, everyone, and over to you, Dr. Suneel.
Thanks, Mr. Singh. You have been so very generous with your words. Thanks, Dr. Saxena, sir, also for being. It is my proud privilege to be on this platform today and sharing basically as a student of solar my thoughts about the topic that is trying to relate mobile telephony with an ever growing aspiration to see solar.
Dr. Suneel, तो yeah,
Yes, yes, yes.
आपका कैमरा ऑफ है.
Okay, yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now his
Yes,
screen is
yes,
visible. Yeah,
yes, yes.
now his
Is
screen
it
is visible.
visible now?
Yes, Dr. Sunil, please go
Okay.
ahead.
As the topic says, like it is a basically an question which is before us, that can solar PV technology replicate the feed of mobile telephony? So inherent in this topic is the fact that mobile telephony has made giant strides in the last few years. So before I trace the actual connection or whatever can be possible between these two aspects, let me try to begin with the solar use in space for space application. The very reason I tried to put up this slide or one or two slides of this nature was that there's a perception that solar was just born for terrestrial or ground-based applications, which is not a true fact. In fact, as we know, solar cells began their journey aboard the space satellites and shuttles much earlier. The very first use of solar cells was made on Vanguard 1 satellite, which was launched by USA. And since then, the journey of solar in the space has continued. It is a curious question to know whether the ground-based solar cells that have come to be in plentiful nature from the last so many years now, are these equivalent or similar to the ones that find their way into space? Well, there's a difference between the two designs, technologies, for a simple reason that solar cells, which are aboard the satellites, they face the outer atmosphere where temperature extremes and radiation extremes are there. So a solar cell has to be such that it meets the temperature, much higher temperatures comfortably, as is also resistant to higher dose of radiation. Gallium arsenide fits this choice best in view of higher temperature tolerance and higher radiation resistance too. If in the manner that we are now discussing the aspiration to find solar everywhere, here, there, everywhere. So it makes logical sense to also know that if space use of solar is helping the mankind in any way, well, these are some of the uses that I have mentioned here, like remote sensing, weather forecasting, agriculture, positioning, location, and use of satellite phones like banking transactions here and there. So if it wouldn't be wrong to say that solar, even though it is far removed from us in the outer atmosphere, it has been serving the mankind since a long time now. Only thing is that we are not privy to it directly. So these are the uses, but why is there an invisible public appreciation for solar space? It is primarily for the reason, as I told you, that since it is not in our close contact and we don't get to basically assimilate it in our terms, that is why the appreciation is removed from us. But it is to be borne in mind that solar is not today serving just the ground mounted use. It is also helping us in the outer atmosphere, from where it is helping us in the ways that I mentioned to you before. But the obvious question here is that is the ground-based use of solar, because it is so close to us, we live on Earth, and if Earth-based use, that is the terrestrial use, would make up for the best possible attraction. Yes, it is definitely so. Before I go further, I just thought of tracing the journey of solar PV for terrestrial use, that is the ground-based use. If I look here, then the journey started right in 63. It would be a few years later when the space journey of solar cells actually began. And the major flip to the solar journey or solar cell development and the whole era around it, it unfolded with the infamous oil crisis way back in 73. Looking at the prices that came crashing from $100 per watt to $20 per watt several years later. And it was in 1980 that 1 megawatt annual production of solar panels basically started. So the first megawatt scale solar project took off in California. And continuing this slide further, what came to be known as a thin film, because solar, as we know, it is basically compartmentalized or segmented into two main technologies, thick and thin. The thin technology basically, which was synonymous for a long time with amorphous silicon, and which was at one time deemed to be the technology of the times. But for more reasons than one, like it couldn't last in that manner. And another thin film technology, cadmium telluride, took off in the year 1992 with an effort at USF. And one more praiseworthy development, but which couldn't actually translate into the gains that were expected, that was the BIPV use when first flexible thin film product was developed and by Dr. Subenda Koha. And year 2000 can be counted as a milestone when worldwide solar PV installation surpassed the 1 gigawatt mark. Let us try to look now. These figures are before every one of us. And here I thought that it would just be refreshing to take a look at it. We have so far progressed into 61 gigawatts of solar PV, which basically touches upon every use, off-grid, on-grid, hybrid use. And these are the figures which are basically the targeted figures for the year 2030 and when we go to 2070 with a net zero emission agenda. Now let me come to the topical theme of today. That is the mobile telephony. Now, it may make sense to relate the mobile telephony with the solar area in more than one way. Let us look at how it can be related. First of all, it makes sense to take a close look at the strides made by mobile telephony at this stage, where we have got 1.2 billion mobile phone users and this much number, that's 600 million smartphone users. And this all points to like the fact that social media has given a big boost to the way mobile phones are being used and looked up for information and entertainment. This is in continuation to the like benefits which are already being reaped through the TV channels and the newspapers. So I think the obvious inference here is that energy demand is going up and up. This is a novel, like growing use. Now I come to the fact that if it is a misplaced, I'm just putting this question, if it is a misplaced notion to compare sunshine abundance with mobile telephony. Well, as I put here, the purpose is not basically, or the underlying rationale is not just to draw a direct comparison, because direct comparison of sorts wouldn't be exactly relevant, but it would be relevant in more than one way differently. Let us for a moment try to relate solar and mobile telephony. Mobile telephony, as I mentioned, that it has cut across the geographical barriers. There is hardly any area of our geographical zone now which is not connected to the mobile network. So, but mobile, as it does not run on its own, it needs power for the charge. So even and to keep it going, one needs to recharge it with the desired amount. So here in the locations that are not served by the grid, solar PV cells can always do a trick of capturing this market. And that doesn't only mean that powering the mobile like charging directly, but the base receiver stations as we know them, which are basically conduits of the signal from one place to the other, they have to keep going. They have to derive power from somewhere. And in those areas, solar can be a quick option, a reliable option, because anyway, and it is also for the reason that solar is not new to those surroundings. Solar has been the mainstay of far off places like rural remote areas since long now in India too. So it is just an extension of the application that would be related. When I look at mobile telephony, so this is one primary reason. But a bigger reason why I took up this relation between the two, that is mobile telephony and solar, was for the fact that now that we are seeing a growing outreach, like some say that it has climaxed and it is still continuing its journey. Solar could be no way different. Solar is so much abundant, plentiful. It has all the key attributes, and one more positive attribute which perhaps was lacking for a long time now is going to mature with the fulfillment of like lithium ion batteries, which are basically receding in price with every passing year. So there is a good amount of effort and the perceptible notion that once it happens, the storage becomes like it basically takes the same route as mobile telephony or even the solar. Now, I would like to take a link up to the solar upwards. That what happened in case of solar PV panels, if that is realized in the battery storage system, and then it could well replicate itself. And when that replication takes place, that is between the storage medium and the solar panels, then the journey or the fulfillment for the mobile telephone outreach in those areas and in many areas too would basically be in tandem. So if the tandem based, if everything synergizes in the manner that we wish to see it, then it could be well, it could not be simply a misplaced notion. One could see a right connection occurring between these three. Now, as I put it, the moot question is on what basis it can turn into a shared reality. Here, one more example, which again goes into the realm of the communication or the telecommunication strikes here. It is basically related to the times when like TV antennas dotted every rooftop. But the very reason that I again take to solar and those antenna times is also because of the reason that one wishes to see every rooftop or every second rooftop dotted with solar panels. And when that realm of the realization cuts across, we can see that how the antennas which sat pretty on the rooftops, they gradually gave way to the dish antennas. And now with another technology like the fiber technology now and the internet-based technology, those dish antennas are also now being edged out or getting replaced. So all these positive attributes and one more similarity that one can draw here between those times, the current times, and the times of the solar is that they are trying to find a common space, that is the rooftop. And again, a very similar external environment, that is the outdoors. All three are basically trying to sit outdoors. And because of the fact, a well-placed fact that solar is exposed to the outdoor environment 24 hours a day. And so are the other means of communication which we are trying to benefit from. This is also a question that we basically relate to in a synergy terms. Now, the key question is that if solar power requirement in our homes is as critical as TV viewing or mobile operation, if not more, then can we expect rooftops dotted with solar panels? This could be a point of disagreement, that not exactly so, because whatever comes as a first need may not be repeated as a second need too. But there are connections because for more reasons than one, like in view, this slide basically looks at the key attributes with which everyone is familiar. And one more thing that one can relate between when one relates to mobile telephony and the solar is basically in the premise that solar, when it, apart from the space use, like it was basically followed for some time with its capability to meet very low power consumer application requirements. And by that measure also, like when we look at the charging power requirements for and the current requirements that go along with mobile telephony on an individual basis, the amount of power used is quite nominal. And so this is one more connection that solar can trace it to the mobile use. And these are all, and another like apart from the portability, it also has an advantage of being hooked to a particular space. And in the times that we are now, like solar has been gradually going up the ladder of recording higher efficiencies with the new design configurations coming in. Let us now try to look at a few. I have purposely avoided to include any graphical representation here. We all go through several data, volumes of data that are available, some in the current time, some for the future, and some in the midterm. I basically chose to avoid that for a simple enough reason that, okay, let us basically try to put a simple perception which may or may not be realistic to go along with. But for a change, I thought that, okay, let us try to figure out a few case scenarios like this. Take, for example, this slide, which goes into specifics of group housing societies. Because when we try to, I mentioned to you that the landscape reality in growing numbers, in very large numbers, because what happens, what was true for antennas at one time, replaced by dish antennas at the second time, and the new technology now because when every house, every rooftop, whichever is available or a potential rooftop, if we see abundance of the solar panels everywhere, then obviously this is a successful proof of the technology demonstration. Apart from the fact that it has been serving industrial, commercial, like it has, I would sum it up by saying that diverse sectors of energy economy other than residential, they are already well entrenched into the solar use. Their use is growing by the day and it is taking place successfully. But for this particular reason, I basically try to limit my presentation to the residential use only. Among us residential use, if I look at the urban space, where probably the real potential lies, the first case is the group housing societies. NCR, for example, has got plentiful nature of the group housing societies. These are all over the NCR. And if I take a small society which has a housing of around 600-700 flats, sanctioned load between 10 to 12 megawatts, assuming. Now let us take a realistic view here. Suppose tomorrow solar goes like solar panel prices, they dive further and they reach quite affordable levels. And not only in terms of the solar panel, but suppose entire system cost touches a low in terms of a ready affordability, then can we still feel that solar will basically find way everywhere, here, there, and everywhere? Probably not, because as we know that in order to touch 100% demand fulfillment, there is a premium on the rooftop space. So rooftop space is not definitely available in the measure that we would like it to be. So thus it doesn't seem to a practically feasible scenario to think of a large penetration of the solar panels within the societies. Yes, as we have been seeing for the last many years now, that common area requirements are being served through solar. They are there in whatever measure they become possible. But I was taking a look at the amount of penetration of solar in terms of the capacity numbers, and glossing over several societies in Gurugram, for example, where I live. So I could find that a few hundred kilowatts was on an average the maximum capacity that a housing society could manage. Of course, they were basically aspiring to put more, but for a variety of reasons, leaving aside common areas for one reason or the other, catering to the parking requirements, and importantly, the net area availability for solar could not mature beyond the levels that it could be suitable enough to house a few hundred kilowatts. So it could be a perception which may not be exactly right, but I just thought of sharing it here. That does this mean just a drop in the ocean of potential capacity deployment? It is under the premise that, okay, let us take a scenario which we are assuming that solar drops, solar prices nosedive, and they reach a quite affordable value. So would that be the stage or the time when solar could be here rather everywhere? Now let us go into case specific number 2, where plotted houses are there, large size plotted houses outside the ambit of the group housing societies, cooperative societies like those. So group housings are like the large size plotted houses. When we make a round of the NCR in several areas or read through it, we basically gain the perception, and rightly so, that large houses are basically, they have rooftop space available. They could be their own generators of the power, but for different reasons, they find working housing a diesel generator or being captive, having a diesel generator with them, it serves their purpose better. So more user convenience is found with the use of generator rather than caring for routine upkeep of solar panels. Because why I mentioned here that they find it more convenient or to go along with the DG is for more reasons than one. A growing perception which has still not been lost sight of on the ground is that solar may work for some time reliably, but it is not the same uh, reliability that is usually associated with other products, say for example, conventional products. Of course, they are in every sphere of use, like quality considerations weigh heavily from one make to the other, the type of workmanship, the installation practices here and there, like we all know it. But a common perception which sometimes makes headlines for a wrong reason ultimately, that solar, it works reliably for some time. I was reading accounts of few housing societies in one of the reviews which mentioned that we basically bestowed or we reposed our faith and belief in solar. It worked wonderfully well for some time, but there was a brief interruption, and when the brief pause was basically investigated, it was for a moment time period ranging between 1 to 2 months even, for various reasons. It could be like different reasons which are there. That means rooftop availability and for the large site plotted houses, despite a sense of aspiration or whatever one may call it, like in growing, getting in tune or being in sync with the present times, or feeling concerned about the climate change or things like that. But when the perception or on the ground is running differently to the need, to the actual need of being served through solar, it goes the different way. Now, case specific 3, small housing clusters. Those would be the ones which have small needs of power. But here I'm leaving the middle segment in between for a moment and coming to small housing clusters. That is where the small amount of power which could be best served by solar is concerned. But for several reasons, and lately for the reason also that in some cases power availability is there, which is at a much lower price, and in some cases free supply of power is being made, and looking at the vulnerability of placing panels in those areas or on those household, on those rooftops with no individual ownership, that also leaves the question wide open, that is it a real case? See, I am not, when I touch upon all the 3 case specifics, it never means that there are not large plotted houses. Some of them are selective number of those, or even the group housing societies which are bereft of solar use on a bigger term. Certainly, there are definite examples where solar has been put up and solar is being used for a variety of end-use applications. There is no doubt about that. But the case specifics here is, it is trying to trace a relation on an extended scale of penetration. That is how it is to be probably seen, apart from the case specifics which I mentioned. Let us also, I was mentioning to you the reliability issue. And looking at that, I have my own experience here, which I basically would like to share with you. And again, I would not take it as a generalized one, but this is what I have been watching. Like there are 3 large plotted houses with spacious rooftops. Of course, the amount of the solar that they have put up on all the 3 rooftops, that is absolutely low capacity. But even then, I have been watching for the last 6-7 years now, that those modules, those panels are mostly, for most of the time, I wish I could go and rub them clean, but I can't do that. But it is, I just see them from a distance, that they are mostly laden with the dust, dirt, bird droppings here and there. And even though I took this case specifically because they have a large number of housekeeping staff also, which are visible every now and then. But despite that, so does it mean that if solar continues to sell with the label of being a self-served one? Because why I say so, this perception also needs to be taken away, or it also needs to be wiped clean. Transparency to the radiation, incident solar radiation, as we all know, like it is going to be reduced, the power, then it amounts to loss of power, and continuing that for longer periods of time is obviously not a healthy practice. But this could not be generic in nature, but this is there as an experience that I thought of sharing. Now, another experience that I look from my own perspective, I also stay in a group housing society, and where the DG backup is available. like a large number of societies in the NCR or elsewhere. But there have been times when the power is interrupted, even though for a few minutes. And incidentally, when I look at my own household, that there's no power backup with us excepting a handheld torch. So the singular case of DG not working at times, it has happened a few times in the past, and assimilating views on similar experiences has not been difficult to seek. It has been there. Of course, we live in the belief that the generator backup will always serve us without any issue. But of course, there have been times. So I was basically trying to figure out if the balcony space that every house, every flat owner has here or in the societies, can it suit the purpose or can it serve the need to basically house a panel, one or two panels, which could be kept exposed in that area. And those panels, apart from giving a sense of fulfillment in those times when generators fail, for whatever duration, they could also align a resident with the sense of the green power. And it also could become a living example of a dotted landscape with the solar panels. So, this in today's times, as efficiencies have grown up, like the space area related considerations have lowered down. So I wouldn't say that it is placing a premium on the limited rooftop, limited balcony space, but that could basically be envisaged. I was looking at few obvious experiences here, like apart from the purpose is not to paint a dismal view or scenario of solar rooftop availability for residential areas. Selective examples are there, and there are larger examples too, where all three categories of houses, as I mentioned to as case specifics, they have been benefiting through solar rooftop systems. And it becomes interesting to look at what has been a bigger transformation so far in terms of the residential use. The one that comes readily on a glossing over several experiences across the country is the one that Gujarat came up with. And it succeeded as well. Like if we look at how much is the capacity of the solar rooftop system for the residential sector, it amounts to around 2 gigawatts of the capacity. And out of that, 65% is attributed to the Gujarat state alone. So the Surya Urja Rooftop Yojana introduced in Gujarat can be looked as an eye-opener, and for a variety of reasons and the advantages that it plays, like discomming directly implementing the scheme, EPC contractors being there in a large number, and digitization right from the first go to the ultimate stage of subsidy dispersal, and what one looks forward in terms of the promise that has been made to the residential, because we come across like several accounts of people like saying that subsidy is still a distance away, even after several months have elapsed in between the time they install the rooftop system. Of course, it varies from one place to the other. No generalization can be made as such. But if a bigger picture has been painted and it has come true with the actual realization of timely dispersal of the subsidy in the Gujarat state, and look at the numbers they are whooping, like in terms of the capacity that has been actually realized. So the success has been phenomenal. And one more experience from Gujarat, like if I spelled it correctly, Data Village Cooperative, Farmers Cooperative, which has put up solar panels on the field, on the agriculture fields. So whatever is self-serving to them in terms of the available power generated, the remaining power is being sold to through a cooperative, which is pooled power supply, for which they get the agreed upon pay tariff. And a number is growing. Of course, this is an isolated example on a field where the dual use of power is solar power is at work. One is, I just heard it, a report on the BBC several days back, where the farmers cooperative was basically like, it was all joyful for a reason of doling out two main benefits. One is selling excess power, and another is selling power, selling the water that is extracted from the solar powered pumps to the people who don't need power but who need the water for their fields. So dual use at work, and a growing number of farmers join the cooperative. But certainly this may be welcomed at a replicated level in other states too. So now the key question is the middle segment. We talked about the group housing societies, the large plotted houses, the small size clustered houses, which are in congested localities. I am not mentioning here the appropriateness of the roof, the direction of the sun, or the cap that DISCOMs place. I am just trying to view it on an open level of usability. So can the Gujarat scheme, can it garner support amongst the potential buyers everywhere? If it could be, then the day wouldn't be far off where we would say plentiful needs of this users being met through solar. There's another area of which I would like to relate to. Of course, it also comes, as I mentioned to you before, in the increase small levels of power, small amounts of power that are basically achievable through the solar cells. When here, I would like to mention that as solar began its journey in the industrial production setups, a good amount for various reasons of was available as a scrap, from which smaller size minute solar cells in minute amounts of power, they were becoming available. And that was the time when very low power consumer product range took shape. Basically, the earliest brush that everyone, most of us would have with the product of that nature was a solar calculator. And it was followed by a large number of consumer products. Like if one tries to relate it to the abundance of the and its use, one could relate it to the countries like Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Japan, for example, where a large number of very low power consumer products, they make appearance and they are readily accepted. So this is another use, but when we look at our country and the need, its need in actual terms, we basically are caught in the fact that very low power consumer product market, which had surfaced at one time. Like I remember having worked in one place in a company, solar company, where we put up exhibition of very low power consumer products, which basically included solar radio, solar mosquito repellent, car ventilator, and solar radio, etc. These were few products, solar keychains, and these kind of products. And one could not believe oneself when a large number of people came for a ready buying of those products. But at that time, we didn't have the stock of the products with us. We basically took details and promised to deliver them. So that this I'm mentioning for a specific reason, that what small is always beautiful. Small beginnings make great endings is an old age adage, basically, which can serve well in the today's times as well. Before we go into higher capacity solar, or before we actually dot every rooftop with the solar panels, so why not basically retry application where very low power consumer products make way into our households? These are needed everywhere, even in today's times, because for a reason that dry cell batteries, Like this slide, if we look at it, the dry cell market in India is estimated at 60,000 crore rupees in in the year that is passing away. So battery usage is basically dominated by zinc carbon cells. Majority of these cells are not basically rechargeable type. Now you can know, where where they land up. It is the place which we know as landfills. They are hazardous in nature. They are not disposed in the manner that they ought to be. So solar, very low power consumer products, like India is a great favorite of the cricket matches, and sports events are basically admired by everyone. Solar radio, solar, these are not new products. These products have basically outlived their innovative history long time back. But the reason why probably one is remembering them all still is because of the fact that rechargeable cells, dry rechargeable batteries, they are very expensive, but we don't notice their expensive nature for a simple reason that the replacement becomes due after several months. And not only that, and other reason being that the way they are disposed of, they ultimately go into the landfills and pollute the soil, and that is the way they go about. And if very low power consumer product market, which is historic in nature, if it is relived, it could be basically providing solar with an opportunity to intrude into households in a positive way. Of course, here intrusion is not in a negative way, but intrude in a positive way much before the appearance of a larger capacity occurs in whatever manner it becomes due. So the mood question again is that can such products fill in the battery segment gap to the extent possible? And I'm sure that this is not a tough proposition. Only thing is that the volumes are required, and the same company I worked with, they tried basically to attain the economies of scale, look at those, develop molds, but for one reason or the other, it basically lost its way somewhere. Now, if I sum up the perspective here, the existing rooftop capacity, as I mentioned to you earlier, like we know it's 2 gigawatts, scheme to rise upwards of 3.2 gigawatts in the years ahead. And the ministry, the scheme, which has been basically streamlined, made, modified and simplified, it is expected to reap good dividends in the times ahead. And importantly, when we look at everything in perspective, combining, looking at how mobile telephony progressed, the way how user base expanded, what are the experiences, how extensive networks grew here, there, everywhere, and how fascination for the mobile telephony came up in real terms, then it leaves us with a lesson learning and experience. Of course, there are cases of this nature, not that this doesn't exist in toto, but if one takes an extended view of this, that means the solar buying experience has to be an inclusive one, all inclusive one. That means it should be an amalgamated process where, as we say, like concept to commissioning, as is the case with the conventional power, like they are in several other cases where this becomes a reality and attains the landmarks or the milestones that are desired. Finally, the solar could well basically be progressing into those levels, but provided an amalgamated approach becomes a reality. I wouldn't say that there are no examples of this nature. There are plentiful examples of this nature too. But it is basically within the purview of the stakeholders, especially those who are into putting up the systems, that they basically look into an all inclusive experience as far as buying experience is concerned, so that they don't have to look for the shades of unfamiliarity with the system that someone is basically aspiring to put up. Solar power, again, yes, there is one more upfront application that is still in the nascent stage. And I also tried to figure it out in terms of what the law, what a good number of housing societies in Gurugram, for example, they are trying to make up for it. This relates to putting up a common charging facility for the residents for EVs, whether be it two-wheelers or the four-wheelers. In some cases, like the argument or the aspiration and the discussion has progressed to some level. The figure of merit in this case has been on a higher side, even though not many demonstrational setups have been there or they are being put up now. In some cases, the residents are objecting to demarcating or to leave the assigned space, which the RWA feels is right for their own reasons. So, but if we look at setting up a EV-based charging facility, like solar-based charging facilities to cater to the requirement of charging for the vehicles, and there are two selective views here. One is that most of the residents, or one would say in the houses societies, they generally own four-wheelers as against the number of two-wheelers. Of course, there's another segment which is basically crisscrossing into the societies every now and then. Those are the visitors basically, which park their two-wheelers for a variety of purposes. But those wouldn't be the type that they are basically consideration worthy to be tapped into the space of charging within the society, because they are anyway in transit and they have other points to go. But as far as four-wheeler charging is concerned, if depending on the size and availability of the area for charging, it would basically not be naive to think along those terms, and already few societies are working upon. It would basically align them with the sense of responsibility of maintaining the charging facility, or basically being affectionate, not in terms of the like the conventional terms, but affectionate in terms of realizing or getting across the appreciated value or the appreciation for a green technology, and importantly, serving or knowing the purpose for which the charging facility has been set up. So this could well mark a beginning in the scenario where the EV charging facilities through solar could become a reality in the times to come. Now, as a concluding slide, I wish to basically share a perception which is not a novel one or a unique one. I would say like there is a differing view here. A solar rooftop system put up in a society ambient or a habitat is currently powering several common applications, like be it the running of the lifts, running the water pumping systems, or basically operating the common area lights or the corridor lights or the garden lights. But the view, if it is convenienced or placed in terms of actual benefit or actual realization of the value that it could have, one would say that like if we connect the common common area lights from the rooftop plant that is sitting well pretty on the rooftop elsewhere, it doesn't serve the same appeal, or it doesn't seem exactly interesting as a standalone garden light in the park, which is being served or which is a solar garden light. The two levels of appreciation are entirely different when we look at such kind of examples. That is the reason one would say that within the society ambience, it would serve a much better purpose of garnering appreciation, keeping a watchful eye on how well the lights are performing, aligning the benefit of the technology to every resident that passes through that area at least once or twice a day. And it has its own multiple benefits, in contrast to the one where the rooftop generated system is power is being fed to operate those lights. So, because there's one more reason. See, in the societies that some society residents that I talk to, they also feel that, of course, there was a time when the rooftop system was being planned. So a view was circulated about its appropriateness or otherwise for the society, and a large enthusiasm was witnessed at that time. So that died there and then after the system got installed. It was for the two reasons. One is that it is away from the glare of the occurrences that take place during the day in terms of the visiting the areas. And another is the common area requirements are being met, which are not basically impacting the flow of the the bill. It is in a very nominal measure. So this is for no illogical reason. This is purely for the logical reason. In whatever measure the capacity has become convenient to be put up, in the same measure they are deriving the benefit. And one more thing, I also witnessed the importance of placing signages. There is a view that technology has progressed to newer levels. Of course, that is true. The inverter, power conditioning units, the whole assembly of the equipment, that has basically advanced in its nature in terms of the performance, reliability, everything, efficiency levels, everything. But there is still a need, a very vital need for awareness generation. It should be viewed as a continuing process. Even in societies, we find that a rooftop system is installed, but nowhere is a signage within the society premises that mentions that a rooftop system is at work. It is working silently and no one is even noticing it. So one wouldn't go every time to the rooftops to see it. But the logical thing is basically to mark the signages or mark the presence of the solar system. It's not alone I am mentioning for the society area. It is for a larger number of, we see solar panels are at work for variety of applications here and there everywhere, but proper signages are still missing in the same way, or as an analogy to which the locational signages are there. One would wish that signages are not lost sight of, they are still available, and they basically present a case where solar power is at work. So another reason for the aesthetics, howsoever we may basically pursue this appreciation for the solar, it is not alone for the attributes that it has, but it is also for the aesthetic presence of the solar. But it wouldn't be naive to say that it's beyond our basically competence, not, and I would say competence, but it is a logical outcome of the environment in which solar panels get placed somewhere. Suppose on the busy traffic lights, suppose in the busy intersections here, there, or in the congested areas where heaps and heaps of smoke, they are like dust, etc. They settle into. And there is a day when we have noticed it several times, that it is not even noticeable, that one could even make out from a distance that the solar panel is at work. So something has to be done about it, so that the perceptible ability to recognize a technology which is so well entrenched today and has the capability or the potential to reside, it is basically best appreciated. I conclude with these remarks, and it was just a perception-based presentation. Yeah, I could be erring, or I could have erred here and there, and I would like to basically receive the questions that are there, so that I can try to answer them. Thank you so much.
Any questions from the people who are listening to this webinar?
One question from Dr. Srinivas.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Srinivasan.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saxena. Thank you, Suneel, for a very useful presentation. I just had this question, which I have put it on the chat box also, but I'll repeat. PMAY has, you very clearly spelled out in one of your slides that cluster housing has a lot of solarization potential.
Yes.
I see that Prime Minister Awas Yojana has built and building nearly 40 million houses where solarizing the roof is one of the activity. I mean, they have not included it as an equipment to be included, unfortunately. Am I right in saying so? And if
Yes.
don't you think it should be? It's a kind of a lost opportunity, or we can still somehow push the policy to consider it in a in an additional scheme or something like that. That's first question. Second
Yes.
question is, I heard Germany, Japan have come out with cells of 35% efficiency. How
Right.
far is India away in making whatever agreements, etc., to get them into India and commercially roll out? Because I don't know whether we are doing enough in solar cell research per se. At least if we can get from other countries through whatever means, is that not be should it be a nudging point for the political leadership to get this technology not only for India but other
Yes.
countries
For other
as a
countries.
part of so-called, we have to, if we have to tread the path of coal phase down, phase out, that should be a technology transfer push that political
Yes.
people who go and make these commitments, that they should get the technology to developing nations. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivas. I would like to take up your second question first. Like attainment of efficiency to the order of 38-40%. Like if I go back to the early days, the cell design of this kind was basically developed by Sandia National Labs, which basically tried to amalgamate two tandems, two cell materials, gallium arsenide and gallium antimonide. It was when we talk about the solar cell design, we basically, our effort is to maximize the amount of absorption of the sunlight, right? As we know, the sunlight is basically comprised of different wavelengths. So here the cell design was basically resting on the fact that the top side would basically absorb large wavelengths, the other side could assimilate the smaller wavelengths. So the fusion of the two would basically complete the spectrum absorption. And rightly so, for the reasons the cell design configuration, it materialized in a conversion efficiency of around 39%. But see, the issues are manifold. Gallium arsenide is almost 4 times more expensive than silicon material. Gallium antimonide is not in that measure. That is one of the strong reasons. Otherwise, if we look at the choice of the material that should go into building the solar cell, one can say very conveniently that if we have a choice of very scaled down costs for the gallium arsenide, then you would not be far away from the day where gallium arsenide would be upwards of 35% efficiency on a real terrestrial setting. And in the same measure, like every material related to comparison, it has its own inherent limitations, and the way we have progressed, and it is also to be settled for the appreciation that we lose a good amount of the solar spectrum, and whatever becomes finally available to us. And if we look at, like, it wouldn't be naive to say that half the spectrum that becomes available to us, it is basically at the level where we have progressed to a conversion efficiency of around 24%, which is, if I'm right, the maximum solar to electric conversion efficiency. One, if I remember my work on gallium arsenide, we had to import wafers that time from Atomic Metals Corporation in US. So, and at a huge cost, but since the project was of sponsored nature and it was for lab work, one could basically get away with it. But gallium arsenide, for very strange reasons, although it is used in, as we know, for MOSFETs, laser diodes, these ASIC circuits, etc. But the cost of gallium arsenide material, it has not reduced in the measure that it would become viable for the solar cell application. And since the effort that you mentioned, like, I wouldn't say readily that it is of course, bifacial solar cells nowadays, like it is the design which has configured into, and we are seeing the launch. We have already witnessed the launch of bifacial solar modules. It is with the same premise that every effort which is in this direction, it is towards maximization of the solar spectrum. Now I come to the first question about which you mentioned. I also did not mention the World Bank support that has forthcome recently in the month of July for around 450 megawatts of the rooftop, especially for the residential areas. Because see, what the perception, what goes, I wouldn't say it goes against this, but if there's an aspiration or a craving that when this any technology, that's why I try to draw a comparison with mobile telephony. Look across the frontier of the mobile telephony. It is a technology which has transgressed today into every space, like regardless of the riches that are associated with the poorest of the poor and richest of the rich. So that is the power of the technology. And one wishes the solar to be on the same pedestal, for the reason that like PM Yojana, 40 million house clustered houses. See, clustered houses can be basically seen or construed as successful examples of this. But the real power of the technology would become visible probably when we see like open-endedness of the technology, it coming right out to the common door. That is not under some arrangement or the scheme, because when it travels like on its own, it fans out in every direction, like the way that other technology, a commonly received technology becomes. I think that would be the test which the technology has to pass. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
There's one more
Thank you,
question.
Dr.
I think
Suneel.
Dr. Saxena from.
Such a elaborate
Yeah.
explanation to Dr.
Yeah.
Srinivas' question.
Yeah, there's one more question from Gokul Prasad.
Yes, madam.
Yeah, you can give him the mic.
Mr. Gokul Prasad, please ask your question.
Recognizing the.
So there's no
I think
responding
His
yet.
question is on decarbonizing the cell towers. Through
Yeah, telecom towers. Is
Yeah.
it possible using solar in decarbonization would solar of telecom towers would help in decarbonization?
Yes, sir. As we know, like service providers, telecom service providers, notably like Airtel in its early stages till the onset of Jio, they basically made up for the reason that if we draw a parallel, like use of diesel in railways and use of diesel for powering of the base receiver stations that go with the telecommunication, the need is next to the use in the railways. So for that very specific reason, company service providers like Airtel in the early stages of technology availability, that is the solar, they try to reason out with the stakeholder consultation that solar could be a good example, while base receiver stations could be basically powered through solar. And other service providers also lend their support to it. I wouldn't say that this has come as a cropper, but there are successful examples where a growing number of base receiver stations have derived power through solar. So, but it has not been materialized in the same measure as it was expected for a variety of reasons. Because as we know, telecommunication is a highly critical need. We are now tuned into the times where even if I lose my WhatsApp message for even a moment, I get restless. So this is the kind of criticality that is associated with the technical telecommunication sector. And some of them, they basically place their premium aspiration about solar, that solar will serve a purpose, and decarbonization of the base receiver stations or along the path that solar becomes ultimately viable and durable. And of course, their numbers, they don't exactly speak for themselves, that there has been a pause in terms of the actual receptivity that service providers associated themselves about the solar. But the journey is continuing, and this area too is likely to maintain an upward trend as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suneel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. My pleasure.
Any more questions?
One point, maybe hybrid is a good choice for telecommunication tasks.
Yes, ma'am. There are like hybrid. If we try to achieve or look at the hybrid, what has been achieved in terms of the hybrid, it is around like less than 2 gigawatts of hybrid solar, which has teamed up with the wind. In some cases, like a good example of hybrid is in a ONGC society in Mumbai, where the wind regime is in coupled with the solar, and they have tried to micro turbines working on the rooftops of the housing society, ONGC housing society in Mumbai. And these are selective examples, but of course these makes the advantages, like when wind is not available, solar is not available at the night when wind regime becomes strong. So that is the time when wind couples up with the system advantage to maximize the gain. But it is a long.
There is an advisory from, I think there were some guidelines that 30% of the new projects are going to be on non-conventional from Ministry of Telecommunications, you know.
Yes, as I mentioned to you, and as is well known, that the use of solar power for this application, it has been contemplated for long. And as a side example, like in African region countries, several African countries, like the way there are no mobile people, like there are no like cycle-borne people who basically go with the solar panels in some areas within Africa. They basically reach out to the households at their doorstep. They recharge their phones with the mobile. Now two ways: mobile and mobile getting charged in a mobile manner through solar power panels, which the person is carrying on the bicycle. So he is traversing the long distances there. There are a number of people that join him in this moment, and this is the way they reach out to the rural areas in Africa, several regions in Africa, which are now basically benefiting through this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suneel. In fact, I can get the point that it is the convergence of reliability and economics
Yes, sir.
which would make a technology come to the doorstep of everybody. Once again, thank you very much, and we appreciate your time for the audience and for the Skill Council for Green Jobs. A formal thank to you. Thank you very much, sir.
I am deeply grateful to you, sir, for providing me this opportunity. I have basically enjoyed it very much. My morning, I have enjoyed it. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, audience. We connect to each other once again on next Friday at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Suneel.
you so much, sir. Thank you.
And all the participants.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.